It can be said that with World War I, not only classical architecture, but also innovation disappeared from the world. Before industrialization, there was only one form of sophisticated architecture in the world, known today as historicism or revival architecture, because according to the official narrative, virtually all of these buildings were created only in the 19th century, supposedly as a recourse to ancient Greco-Roman architectural trends. Neo-Gothic, Neo-Renaissance, Neo-Baroque, etc. The basic principles of these buildings were always the same and their quality unrivaled. Is this uniform architecture an indication of a unified civilization that only recently broke up into individual kingdoms or nation-states? Even in Japan, there were these Greco-Roman classical buildings before 1900, although Japan was still completely isolated from the outside world until around 1850. And even after that, after the British had forcibly conquered Japan, it only slowly and hesitantly opened up to the West. The German chronology critic Christoph Pfister writes in his book The Matrix of Ancient History about the chronological dating of European building culture.
It turned out that today's Occidental building culture, the emergence of today's medieval cities, date back about 300 years before today. Before that, according to today's linguistic usage at the beginning of the 18th century, there was still a culture in Europe that can be called Roman, or rather, late Roman. In a political sense, too, there seems to have been a late Roman Empire. In this, however, the political center of power shifted from Gaul to Germania. The collapse of the late Roman Empire was a fact. However, it cannot be said what the causes were. Natural disasters, epidemics, political, economic, and cultural factors are mentioned as triggers. The breakup of the old Roman power created the basis for a new, modern culture. This was, in a sense, rebuilt on the basis of a tabula rasa. There was a turning point of culture with apparently only few connecting points to the former civilization. The cultural dynamic of Europe was expansive towards the outside. Towards the West, the discovery and colonization of the two Americas and then of Africa and Asia took place. The successful colonization of the New World and East Asia saved Europe and gave it a privileged position as a world colonial power from about the middle of the 18th century. The New Europe, which emerged in the first decades of the 18th century, first invented the written language that has been preserved today, and thus the written culture. Art and architecture, too, were largely created only after the great political and cultural break. Christoph Pfister.
In other words, the colonization of the world did not take place until 1700 at the earliest, but was backdated by the falsifiers of history on behalf of the imperial powers. Imperialism developed as a reaction to an event, possibly a war or a natural disaster, which wiped out the old, so-called ancient world and left a power vacuum. Western Europe managed to emerge from this vacuum as a winner. Imperialism was kind of a worldwide raid by the Western European powers to grab the countries of the world that had been devastated by the catastrophe. The conflicts between the individual colonial powers, Spain, Portugal, England, Germany, etc., that have been handed down historically are part of the game of hide-and-seek played by the European power elite organized in secret societies and shadow organizations. But these conflicts took place only on a superficial political level because, as is the case today, public decision-makers were rarely privy to the real plans.